earliest newspaper recordings that people suspected foul play from it. The idea that there were people among us that were traitors.
They said it was just like an opening in the woods. That was a description that I read.
Shoals, Indiana was settled in 1844, nestled along the East Fork of the White River and surrounded by forest. In 1857, it became a meeting point for a new mode of transportation.
That's what made Shoals, that's what brought it all here, because Shoals was a stop. It was a stop on the railroad.
A golden spike was driven in Shoals to celebrate the completion of a new railroad connecting Cincinnati and St. Louis, built by the Ohio and Mississippi Railroad Company. This connection linked Shoals to the rest of the country and to a tragedy that would occur in the years ahead.
That the 19th Illinois Volunteer Infantry Regiment was serving out, doing guard duty out in Missouri. But then they had a call from the east for reinforcements. And they were part of a couple of regiments. They were sent from Missouri to Washington, D.C. to reinforce what would become the famous Army of the Potomac. On their way, they were in two trains. When they had passed through Martin County, Indiana, on the Ohio and Mississippi Railroad, they had come through Shoals, and the first train came by and it went through just fine. About 15 minutes later, just before 9 o'clock at night, September 17th, 1861, the second train was coming through. And they had passed over what was called Bridge 48, and when their train had passed over it, it had knocked a rail loose, and that knocked a trestle loose, and it basically, the car that came after it completely knocked it up, and then the cars that came after that just went tumbling down into the creek. The whole bridge collapsed as soon as the engine made it across, basically. In that wreck, 28 men died, 100 were wounded. 20 of the men were from Galena, Illinois, from Company I. And the reason that there was so much death in that company was because their car was the first one to go into the bottom of the creek. And the other cars behind them crushed them and came right on top of them. So a lot of men died, a lot of men drowned. It was really bad. After the wreck, initially what had happened was they had sent somebody to the nearest train stations that they could to telegraph that the accident had happened and to stop any other trains from coming through. A special train was sent down from Cincinnati, Ohio, to transport the men to an army hospital. They were originally all going to be buried at Spring Grove Cemetery in Cincinnati, Ohio. The citizens of Galena, Illinois, 20 of their men had died all at once. And so they were very shocked and very obviously emotionally invested in what had happened to their loved ones. And so they petitioned that their mayor travel to Cincinnati to retrieve the bodies of the men, and he brings them back to Galena, Illinois. And they have a resolution that is passed by the citizens of Galena. They basically say that we purchased this plot in the city cemetery and it's dedicated to these men and any other men that will die during this war. There's been rumors afoot, and you can see this even in the earliest newspaper recordings, that people suspected foul play from it. It certainly didn't help that a few years later, Jackson Ballard was murdered up here in Martin County, and they believe that was by a man associated with the Knights of the Golden Circle.
He was my great-grandmother's brother. He was a soldier. I mean, Jackson Ballard was a Union soldier. He was a private. They said he was on horseback, and he saw what they called the butternut flag, which was something that the Knights of the Golden Circle used to identify each other to other members. And he supposedly tore it down and stomped it. And this man said, "I'll get you for that." And then they were out looking, like I said, for this deserter, and he had only gone out just a little ways from where he was living, and they were laying in wait for him and shot him off his horse. We were north of the Mason-Dixon line for sure, but with a lot of the people coming in from the Carolinas and through Kentucky and Tennessee, there was a lot of Southern sympathy here for what a lot of them believed in.
Just the fact that a soldier on leave was murdered in the middle of the day or in the middle of the night up here in the county really helped to foment that there was the idea that there were people among us that were traitors. The Knights of the Golden Circle was a pretty large group, pretty infamous group, underground society, really big in the Midwest, particularly in Indiana. But the Cincinnati Chamber of Commerce hired a committee of practical engineers, people that worked on railroads. They hired them out to go out to the accident, and another separate committee did the same, and they both came to the same conclusion, that they didn't believe that any foul play was suspected. They couldn't find anything that looked like it had been sawed or hacked away, like a timber. They thought, from the marks that they could see, that one of the rails had been popped up, one of the timbers had been popped up whenever the locomotive had made it across, and that snagged on one of the following cars, and that's what caused the accident. And the other committee came substantially to the same result. Some of the stuff that we do, like whenever you're talking about dedicating monuments.
Talon Allen's passion for history has fueled his research and collaboration with members of the Martin County Historical Society, who share his commitment to preserving and sharing the region's past.
The more that anybody, I think, chases something that they're passionate about, you kind of run into people, you stumble into people that are just as passionate about it as you are. I'd gotten a call from a member of the Historical Society, and he said, "You won't believe it, but we were just talking about this train wreck last week."
And working with the Martin County Historical Society, and then we started fundraising together and getting other things together with that to get the Willow Valley accident remembered, because soldiers, they died in the service of their country.
We originally started out, it was I wanted to get a monument. I was like, I think a monument with all the names of the men that died would be appropriate. We pondered a little bit whether or not we would get a state historical marker or some like bronze marker or something like that would just have the very short end of the story. And we ultimately decided that was going to be a little too expensive, but that also it was just going to be more appropriate to be able to give some visuals to the story, to have a large sign that could have pictures on it, because there's a picture of the wreck, there's a picture of Captain Howard, we've got a picture of the cemetery where a lot of the men were buried. That would go a long way to really kind of evoking emotion out of people when they read it. I'm trying to get the Sons of Union veterans more established in southern Indiana. So I'm trying to make a camp up here in Martin County or in Orange County, Indiana, to sort of serve as a base of volunteers to do more projects like this. Because I'm sure that somebody out there has probably got another story that's just as interesting.
He's very interested in the Civil War and things that went on during the Civil War. I'm so glad, because it's nice to see younger people, carry on, the love of history.